The Scribes Chamber. In this video, we're going to look at the Scribes Chamber in Jerusalem. We're going to look at the Scribes Chamber in the Dead Sea Scrolls area called Qumran. Very exciting. The Scribes Chamber in Jerusalem is outside of the king's house. There you see it circled, discovered in archaeology, described as the House of Bula, or seals. So it's important that people understand that the temple itself is an administrative building. There are many offices and cubicles for the scribes, for the servants and officers to the king. You see them on the right and left of the temple here in rows of 3 of chambers. This is the first temple that Solomon built and the future temple in Ezekiel. You see them going around the temple itself, cubicles, okay, for the scribes. So the temple itself is an administrative building. Outside of the temple, there is also gates, east, west, south, north, which we're going to look at as well, that have administrative offices, buildings, and structures for the king. You see here, you see the temple, you see the holy place, you see the Holy of Holies. Then around it, you see pillars, galleries. And attached to those galleries are chambers. So there you can see it. There are 30 chambers per row. There's 3 rows. And these are chambers to the scribes, to the king. Okay? So the temple itself is a administrative building. And then from there it expands out into gates, east, west, south, north, which have other gates. One of the ones we're going to look at is in the west, called Parbar. We actually know where this gate is, this structure, where the officer called Nathan Melech, we found his seal, and we know where that precise location is. Now, the gate of the west we find in 1 Chronicles chapter 26 verse 12, where we have the divisions of the gates and the porters east, west, south, north. Okay? And there are wards having ministers to the house of the Lord, Parbar westward, 4 at the causeway, 2 at Parbar. So westward we have this gate. It's called an open apartment. In Hebrew it's called Parbar. It's a structure building attached to the west side of Solomon's temple. So we actually have the location of the temple by this gate. At the entering in of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan Melech, the officer which was in the Parbarim. So we actually found his place. Here at the Givati parking lot excavation, which you can see behind me, we have found a shocking discovery, an amazing discovery. The seal, Bula seal of Nathan Melech. A seal is like your signature, and we're going to look here at this excavation, his seal, written in the Bible in 2 Kings 23, verse 3, his chambers, okay? His chambers are here in this excavation. And here you can see at the entrance of the house of the Lord in the chamber of Nathan Melech, the officer, which was in, here it says precincts, but that's Parbarim. So we found the archaeological dig here at Givati Parkland found his seal in the precise.
The Givati parking lot. The excavation that revealed more than 11 layers of civilizations, ranging from the recent Muslim period all the way back in time from the Crusaders, back into the Byzantine period, all the way down to the Second Temple period, and eventually, as we descend more than 40 feet underneath the ground, deep into the biblical layer, back in time more than 2,500 years, to see the destruction of the First Temple.
And here we are with Professor Yuval Gadot from Tel Aviv University and Dr. Yiftach Shalev from the Israel Antiquities Authority, the 2 world-renowned archaeologists who are responsible for bringing the discoveries in the Givati parking lot to life.
You can see that I'm standing right now inside of the room, standing on the actual floor of that building, and you can see that the room was perfectly preserved at 2.5 meters. And it was preserved this way because we found it filled with debris. On the floor we found remains of the vessel people were using during that time that were left in the house when it was destructed, and also some indication for the activities that happened here. For example, we found here a bula, a small stamp seal that mentioned a name, and the name was Lenatan Melech Eved HaMelech, Natan Melech, servant of the king. Servant not as we find it today, poor person who need to serve food, but a minister or high degree person serving in the temple. And that name, Natan Melech, is also mentioned in the Bible as a minister at the court of Josiah.
So here, if we open up the biblical pages, you're saying in the time period of Josiah, either some type of royal servants or ministers of the king would have been here, Yiftach, working, and then later on the Babylonians came through and destroyed this?
Exactly. We are now at the royal neighborhood of Jerusalem, if you want. Archaeologists found similar houses in other places around the city of David. Not as big as this house, by the way. This is one of the biggest and most preserved one. But yeah, this is where people lived during these days.
So we heard from Dr. Shalev about this incredible royal room where ministers are living. Professor Gadot, would you please explain to us?
And you can see here the stones. All of these stones are the stones of the upper floors that collapsed inward. Okay, so this is already part of this 586 collapse. But we know for certain that this place burnt. And why do we know that? This is because of what we're trying to preserve here. First of all, the ashes, okay? Simply the ash. Okay, that's the burning of the building in 586 BCE.
That is the ash of the destruction of the time period of the first temple.
Exactly.
Okay, here we have a seal. This is very significant, guys. This is called a bulla. See, at this spot, a bulla, an imprint in clay used to seal documents. So we have a bulla. This is a particular scribe. It's very small, the size of your fingertip, and it would seal a document. So in Jeremiah 32, you can see this is a scribe. In Jeremiah 38:1, a scribe would have sealed a document. Now, so there we can see the actual person, the name of their father, servant of the king. Proof of the biblical text is accurate. But not only that, we would like to propose that there's more going on here than just finding a seal impression and finding the seal impression in the biblical text, but the location of where the seal impression was found is very significant, and that's what we'd like to propose to you. So here is a map of the area of the king's house, King David's palace, and there you can see, if you look closely, you can see the Utica seal. There you can see the bulla, where it was found. It was found in a place we might call a chamber. And it's possible that where it was found was his actual chamber that was part of the king's house. So many of these scribes had rooms in the temple and the king's house. Here you can see one of them, Jeremiah, belonged to Jeremiah. These are some replica seals, okay? And we have the famous scribe Baruch, who was Jeremiah's personal scribe, a replica of his seal impression. We find them both in Jeremiah chapter 36, verse 10. Then read Baruch the book of the words of Jeremiah in the house of the Lord, in the chamber of Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe, in the higher court at the entry of the new gate of the Lord's house. So we have not only the scribe, but they have chambers. Isn't that amazing? Here we're holding a replica of Jeremiah's seal, and then we can see that he actually had a chamber in a room in the temple. Amazing. Now, that was discovered in a place called the Bulla house, which you see at the bottom of the screen. This is the scribe's chamber. Okay? We'll read that in Jeremiah 36 as well. But this is the scribe's chamber where all the scribes held chambers and offices. They went down into the king's house, into the scribe's chamber. All the princes sat there. Elishama, the scribe, Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe. So there you can see the close proximity of the king's house and the scribe's chamber. Okay, here we have the steps of ascent. Above would have been possibly David's palace, and we have a home here just below, and we do have more of the scribes mentioned. This is Jeremiah 36. Jeriyahu. But within this is the scribe's room, and many bulla, many seals were found here. Where exactly is the scribe's chamber, you ask? Well, it's right below us. It's right down here. Unfortunately, the visitor center is covering over the area where the archaeology took place to find the scribe's chamber, the house of Bula. But that's okay. We can read the signs and we can read the information and see that this was in fact places where great destruction took place. We have the burnt house, we have the burnt room and the house of Bula. So this is where we see the destruction of the temple, destruction of the palace, and at the lower end of the excavation site, the archaeologists found remains of the archive known as the House of Bula. We're calling it the Scribes' Chamber. The fire consumed all the scrolls and documents, but hardened and preserved the Bula, and imprinted seal impressions which part of papyrus documents were sealed. Some of the Bula bear names from the Bible, as we have read to you. Jeremiah, son of Shaphan, who was a high-ranking official in the court of the king. As we read in Jeremiah 36:12, that not only did we find his chamber, he had a chamber, Jeremiah had a chamber in the house of the Lord, in the temple. And below where we're standing right now, we find his actual seal impression in the chamber of the scribes. And we saw very clearly that the scribe's room is next to the king's house. So we have the scribe chamber down below. There you can see in front of us the house of Ahiel. These are noble people, and that's what we're looking at in front of us, the remains of their destroyed houses. And then up above here is the king's palace, or the king's house. And clearly, from the biblical text, it says that those are in close proximity to each other. So that we have the temple, the king's house, and the scribe's chamber, as we saw in Jeremiah chapter 36. So in this area, we have clear evidence and remains of First Temple period artifacts. Not only that, we can clearly understand by reading the biblical text and looking at the archaeology that the seals were found. If we look again down below where the scribe's chamber was, okay, and we look up above, we see the king's house. Simple common sense. We can see the biblical text is very accurate. It's very clear that many of these scribes had chambers, offices, down below where the scribe's chamber was, and then up above in the king's house. They also had chambers that the scribes had, servants to the king. Next, let's go to Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the scribe's chamber, the very place where we find all the scrolls of the biblical text from the Dead Sea. They were all drafted in tables. You can see the tables, and we're going to go to the site in the desert. Okay, guys, very exciting. We are in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we have something called the Scribes' Room. I can't tell you how exciting this is. And they shall answer in the rule according to his rank and his brothers in the law for the judgment, for the purity, and for the placing of his possessions in common, and his vice will be for the community as well for judgment. So they have here a scribe table. This is an actual draft table where they wrote the scrolls from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the actual table that they used. The writing of the scrolls. And this is a overlay of the area. And here we have a scroll, let's see, the community rule scroll. And these are the laws of the community, which we'll look at a little bit as we go. These are phylacteries, and these are what the men would put on their forehead during times of prayer. So we know this is a type and shadow of the seal of God on the forehead. These are the bowls found in the Dead Sea of the community meals when they have meals together in common. And at nighttime, this is an actual lamp, and at nighttime they would write the scrolls. They would do their study time at night into a third of the night. And the scribe room was 2 layers, upper floor, lower floor. There you can see the tables and there were many scrolls, and once they realized that the place would go into destruction, they hid those in jars and put those in caves in the surrounding area. Here we have the scribe room, and photograph is showing 2 stories. In this room, plastered mud brick benches and tables were discovered, along with 3 ceramic and metal inkwells, attest to the fact that the scribes who copied the scrolls sat here. And when the Roman army approached Qumran in 68 CE, the scribes placed the scrolls in enclave jars and hid them in the caves that we saw. So this room is the scribes room. Amazing. And if we look closely here, you can see the way the scrolls are placed in rolls and then placed in jars and hidden. Here we have one of the things that was in the community was treasury rooms, but after he has entered the council of the community, he shall not have any share or property of the congregation. So they held all things in common, and they, after 1 year, would give all their possessions to the community, and they lived in common. Then it says, if his destiny to enter the company of the community, his property and earnings shall be handed over to the bursar of the congregation. And these rooms belong to the administrators. I believe we saw this in another place where we could see the coins and everything. But these are the treasury rooms. So they patterned this community after the temple. The temple also had treasury rooms and other things. And here we are in the dining room. They shall eat in common and bless in common and deliberate in common when the table has been prepared for eating and the new wine for drinking. The priest shall be the first to stretch out his hand to bless the bread and the wine. This is the members' assembly room for the meals right here. And if we look back, that's the space. So this is the assembly dining room. Guys, based on the size of this room, everyone would assemble for the meals, and the estimated number of people that would fit in the room would be 120. And that's the approximate size of the community. And one of the interesting things about the mikvahs, the ritual bath, is that you walk down one way. So you walk down there and you come into the bath, light permitting, you can see that. And then you can see how the steps, if you come down this way, you go into the bath, and then you exit another way. See that? And then you exit here in a way in which you are clean. So you go down one way and come back up another. This is what we know to be baptism in modern times, and you know, very well displayed here in Qumran. Here the Bedouin discovered this cave in August of 52. 14,000 firing scores were unearthed as they are sifted through the dust. So that is what we can see in this one here. Amazing. Nice view of the park here and the Qumran ruins. Sundial over there, and here is the Dead Sea, and you can see this is the northern part of the Dead Sea. Okay, here in Qumran we have somewhat of a replica of the old city walls of Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, this would be running south. okay, going down. In Jerusalem, there was a pool called the Pool of Siloam, and over here we have a mikveh, somewhat to represent that, and walls that run up. Then we have this wall running to a tower, and we can see this is a tower. It's a fortification. You could see the angles of it going up. Now, what this exactly is, this is not so much a military type of community. And then we have other parts where we have a treasury room and things over there. We do know in the first temple there was an Ophel, and that would have been there. From this vantage point, we have a large cistern here. We can show you the large cistern and leading to other parts here. But this site, being that it replicates the walls of Jerusalem, may actually give us an indication of the location of the temple. We're going to do our best to look at the information, look at the walls, and submit to you that information to potentially find something that shows us 200 BC, 100 BC, the actual location of the temple. Here is a sundial, and let's remember this community found the true calendar, the Enoch calendar, and applied it properly as a way of preparing the way of the Lord. Now, many believe that John the Baptist was part of this community in his early years when he left his parents and he went into the wilderness. It's not certain if that's the case or not, but even within the park, there's a video presentation kind of reenacting this idea that John the Baptist was in this community, and they were discussing with the preacher of righteousness that he was beheaded by Herod. And is this the same one, the same John the Baptist preparing the way of the Lord before Yeshua?
The good Lord, He supplies us with all our needs, even in this barren desert. This morning, while working in the date grove, a neighbor from Emil Kaner, a 5-hour walk from here, passed by. He told us of the bitter end of one John the Baptist, whose head was severed by King Herod. Suddenly, I remembered we too had one by the name of John. Years ago, he came to us and requested to volunteer. Each new candidate undergoes a thorough examination and, once accepted for a season of study, joins us in work as well. At the end of 2 years' time, just before becoming a full member, he arose, broke his vow to Yahweh, and left. Twice daily we bathe together in the purifying bath in order to be sanctified in the pure waters. And after bathing, we gather together to dine. First, we taste from the pure bread that was prepared for us by the high priests, and then from the wine. When we went for our evening's toil, we inscribed the high priest's words describing the Lord who created the spirits of light and darkness, and thereupon makes everything. The first was greatly loved by God, each of its actions desired. The second, and all that it encompassed, he despised forever. At the end of a day's work, we bathed again, and after purifying ourselves, gathered together for the evening meal. We dined in perfect silence, even when troublesome thoughts preyed upon us. After the meal, I arose and asked for permission to speak. Could it be that the man who was murdered, of whom we heard from the passerby, was the same John that was with us and then left? It is not the same man, replied the high priest, and in truth we would be better employed in the studies of the Holy Scriptures rather than wasting our time in the idle talk that spoils the spirit of Yahweh. The wrath that ensued was so great that a remark was noted in the book in my disfavor. After having been punished, things calmed, and we resumed our studies as we do every night until a third of the night has passed. But of these things I am not permitted to tell you. We may not reveal our secrets to anyone. Only we, the sons of light, are allowed to share the secrets of Yahweh. This alone may be revealed. All is predestined. There is no free will. Even before the time of creation, it was inscribed that you, somewhere in the future, would hear and see these words. It is God's wondrous plan that brought you today to this pure and secret place. And God willing, perhaps the secrets may be revealed unto you.
In the year 68 CE, just before the Roman army arrived in this part of the country, members of the Yahad hid their writings, put them for safekeeping in the caves surrounding us. Only 1900 years later was the treasure accidentally found inside vessels like those you see before you.
So what is the meaning of the scribe's room? Let's remember that Jerusalem is a pattern with the temple of heaven. In the heaven is God's throne. In God's throne, he has 24 elders. So the scribe's room represents the council of the 24 elders in heaven. The 24 great scribes encircling a lamb who only is worthy to open the seal and to release the scroll. That allows you to understand the proceedings taking place in Revelation chapter 4 and 5 of the 24 elders around the throne, around the Lamb. It's a scribe's chamber. These are the 24 elders. These are the great 24 scribes. And they explain to John the proceedings taking place around the Lamb with the seals. So it is from this scribe's chamber, this heavenly scribe chamber, we can understand in our day seals being released, information, revelation being released in our day. So guys, thanks for watching. Let's remember only the Lamb is worthy. We must cast our crowns at his feet. Thank you for watching, and look in the description field for the links. God bless.